It's time.
It's time for a new episode of TMG.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to TMG. I'm your host, Travis Patton Sr. I enjoy discovering and sharing real-life moments of inspiration from everyday people. And this show is about finding moments of inspiration for our everyday lives. And look, and if you're going to tell me something, then tell me something good. Hi, everybody, and welcome to a brand new episode of TMG. I'm your host, Travis Patton Sr. Guys, real quick, before we get out of here, how we get started, don't forget to visit our YouTube page. That's Tell Me Something Good with the capital T. There it is right there, guys, on your screen. Visit our YouTube page. And guys, you know how I like to do it. Before we get this underway, I got to give a huge props, biggest shout out to my biggest supporter, my lovely wife, Nicole. Hey, Nicole, girl, how you doing? I know you're watching. I know you're listening. Everybody around the world knows your name, girl. Guys, I'm so excited to be here today. I've been talking about this show, this episode all week, all day, and my head is about to explode because I'm excited about it from our guest. Guys, listen, if you did not get a chance to get the title of the show, the episode today is called Flip the Switch. Yeah, Flip the Switch. And as we get into it, you're going to find out why we need to flip the switch on some things. Guys, listen, you know this show has been around for a little while, and it's taken some really great traction, all because of you, our listeners, and thank you. If this is your very first time tuning in, your very first time listening, let me take the time to tell you, thank you for joining the show. I'm so glad that you took the time to tune in today. And maybe you say, Travis, man, I've been listening to your show for all 3 years. I'm zoned in. I'm tuned in. Thank you so much for listening to the show each day. As you can see, guys, that this show is all about finding ways to be inspired in our everyday life with everyday people like you, like me, like our special guest, like the person at the gas station, right? So, that being said, if you have a story that you would like to share and maybe come on the show as a special guest, or maybe you know someone with an inspiring story that they would like to share and become a guest on the show, guys, go ahead and shoot me an email. It's right there on your screen. Tell me something 21@gmail.com. And if you're going to go back and listen, let me just spell it out for you. TELL me something 21@gmail.com. Guys, if you can look behind me, you can see that we're honoring Women's History Month. Yeah, a lot of great women in history that have done some amazing accomplishment and amazing achievements that if it wasn't for them, some of the things that we look forward to, some of the things that we take for granted, honestly, guys, would not be here. My wife, Nicole, shared something very fascinating with me. She shared a special link that it's from a car company, a car commercial. And I won't mention the name of the car company, but I am going to put the link in chat if you want to check it out. And it's honoring women's history. You can check it out right there. There it is. Click on that link and you will see it. Guys, tonight's episode is going to be absolutely amazing. It's being heard in places all around the globe. China, Japan, guys, the UK, you name it. We are there. Guys, tonight's episode is entitled Flip the Switch. Now, we have all felt pressures of life, right? In some way. everything from our careers, our family, relationships with others, and even the way we think about ourselves. Now, sometimes facing these things and facing down this anxiety and these negative thoughts and emotions can become as terrifying as going head to head with a lion. Wouldn't it be easier? Just me, just thinking, just me. Wouldn't it be easier if there was a switch, one magical switch, that we could turn these feelings off? Whenever we got overwhelmed, we just hit a switch and turn them off. Whenever anxiety hit us, we would hit it, switch, and just turn it off. Whenever pressures from jobs and family would come on, we flip a switch and it would just kind of turn off. Guys, our special guest today is an author and a mental health advocate. Through his experience, he shares how to get out of our heads and try to find ways that switch can be turned off. Guys, I want to give a huge, warm TMG welcome for our very special guest, Brian Sachetta. Come on, Brian, get on here and tell everybody hello.
Travis, I do not know if I can match that energy. Holy crap. You brought it, and I'm just leaning back over here like, hey, what's going on, everybody? Good to be here.
Oh, man, we're glad to have you here. Guys, I told you he's talking that like that. But, guys, listen, we talked before the show. We had a conversation well before. He's got plenty of energy, guys. Don't let his mild-mannered demeanor fool you. He's got it in him. That's why he's here on the show. Man, it is an honor to have you here, Brian. It really is with us at TMG. Tell us a little bit about yourself, Brian, and what it is that you do, man.
Yeah, it's great to be here. The energy is really it's unlike something I've seen before. So I got to hand it to you, Travis. It's an amazing environment.
Thank you, man.
In terms of what I do, right? So I'm an author, blogger, podcaster in the mental health space. I run and own a brand called Get Out of Your Head, which is both a book series and that brand. It basically seeks to help folks overcome anxiety and depression in a variety of different ways, right? So got the blog posts, got a couple books, have a coaching practice, work with folks to help them discover their own switches, right? So you talked about at the beginning in the intro, like, how do we flip the switch? What is the switch? I do want to say there is no one magical switch. Everybody has their own switches. And so what we have to do is we have to do this difficult inner work to figure out what those switches are, allow people to empower themselves to then, find that information and say, okay, I've identified what my switches are. I'm in these anxiety-provoking, depression-provoking situations. I now need to go back to my switches and be like, boom, I got to hit that one, right?
Oh, guys, I told you he was going to bring it with you, guys. I told you he was going to bring it. And you're absolutely right, Brian. I think, Brian, a lot of times, this isn't me. A lot of times, man, we look for we're in a society where we look for a one fix all. If it's blue this time, we think blue's going to be, if the blue is the answer, we expect blue to fit every problem that we have. It's not a one-fix-all situation when it comes to anxiety, when it comes to stress, when it comes to depression, when it comes to battling or dealing with negative thoughts in our minds. And we look for that one-fix-all. You hit it right on the head, man. It is not one switch. And we want it to be like a light switch. You come in a room, and if it's dark, you hit that one switch, and now there's light. And that's how we think life is. We hit one switch, and all of a sudden, oh, now I'll be better. Or now I'll think better. Or now I'll perform better. Or now I'll be a better person. And we have to understand, going through life, it's going to take a series of switches that we're going to have to hit. It's not one switch that's going to make our entire lives better. It's going to be a whole series of switches that we're going to have to hit, Brian.
Yeah, there's no doubt about that. I think a good analogy to bring into this space right now is people will say, like, the journey to success is not a straight line, right? It's the same thing with whether we're talking about like success in, making money, getting a job that we want, whatever. It's the same thing with mental health, right? It's like, there's going to be good days. There's going to be bad days. There's no such thing as like, oh, I figured it out, I'm good to go, right? Life has a way throwing its challenges at us. But I think the main thing, right, is sort of being able to zoom out and have the philosophical perspective that, like, if I talk about myself, right, it's like, I know that whatever this life throws at me, I feel as though I have the tools to be able to figure those things out. And okay, maybe, maybe something comes my way and I take 5 steps backward. But I know that at least in the last 10 years, the last 15 years,
Yeah.
I've taken 40 steps forward, right? And so it's like the sort of overwhelming or the underlying thing there is to just try to figure out ways to continue that forward progress, right? Because there, like you said, there are going to be bad days. There are going to be times that life throws crap your way. So it's really just figuring out what are those tools that enable you and empower you to keep striving forward.
Oh man, you are absolutely right. When you mention the word tools, I think about a toolbox, and whether you are handy with tools or maybe the only tool you know is a hammer or a screwdriver, it doesn't matter what that tool is. If you need a screwdriver, you grab a screwdriver or reach for a screwdriver or something that can work as a screwdriver. And that just takes a whole different perspective. If you can't find a tool that you need, then work with the tool that you have. Oh, yeah, I'm not going to go there, Brian. But what that just simply means, Brian, if everything isn't working the way I want, if it doesn't look how I want, make it work with what you got. Do something, but the accountability falls on us to use those tools. If I want to build something, I can have the brand new tools, the best of tools. But if I never go in that box, man, those tools will sit there and they'll rust. They'll have name brands on them. But guys, listen, we can do it. That's why we're here tonight, guys. Flip the switch. It's going to take multiple switches to get where we're trying to go.
No doubt. Yeah. I one thing I want to touch upon real quick before we jump on to the next subject is, so, I've got this book. The first one in my series is called Get Out of Your Head, a toolkit for living with and overcoming anxiety. So it really touches upon what you just mentioned, right? It's having this toolkit, this tool belt, this set of tools that we can leverage. And I think it's sort of like we have to figure out what kind of person we are, right? Are we a carpenter? Are we a general contractor? Something like that, right? Because not everybody is going to have the same tools in their, sort of proverbial toolkit. And so a lot of the work that I do involves throwing different ideas at you, the listener, the reader, and allowing those folks to distill those things down, try them on, so to speak, and be like, that one works for me. That resonates with me. That does not resonate with me. I don't like that idea, right? Unfortunately, Absolutely. It's like you said, there is no one size fits all solution here. So we have to try a bunch of different things out. The good news, though, is that there are so many different strategies out there, and it doesn't take that much time, right? To be like, hey, you know what? I'm feeling anxious. I'm going to do some box breathing or something like that.
Absolutely.
And then maybe we say to ourselves, hey, I didn't actually like that. I'm going to go try something else. So, the overall philosophy of what I do is it's helping people find what those tools are, try them on, and build their own individualized toolkits. Because it's like, if I give you mine, it might not be the right one for you. So we're all about trying to find what that toolkit is. And then that way, when you find yourself in those situations where you need those tools, you can pull them out.
Absolutely. Guys, you didn't snap. He says, what one person has may not be exactly what you need. Have you ever needed something and you go ask someone to borrow something? Hey, can I borrow blah, blah, blah? Or do you have blah, blah, blah? And they go, no, I don't have that. For me, it'd be like, some people say, hey, look, man, I want to make something to drink. I got peanut butter, but no jelly. You have peanut butter, but you don't have the jelly. You don't have the other tool to go along with it. So you have to search it out. We may not have every tool we need, but we have to search it out. Brian, quite a few people, and this is 2023, man, everything is instant. And when everything comes instant, man, there's a lot of pressure on instant. There's a lot of pressure because if one person does something instantly and they get instant results, I'm expecting that now too. If I do the same thing, I want instant results. We look for instant, and there's a lot of pressure and anxiety in today's society from instant answers, instant, instant things. So quite a few people battle with depression. I know I have family members that dealt with depression. I dealt with depression a long time ago. And a lot of people may be dealing with it and don't realize it and want to maybe hide it or tuck it under because of the mystique that goes along with it. maybe because they just don't know enough about it, you know. But quite a few people deal with depression and anxiety on a day-to-day basis. Some people woke up with depression. They woke through the whole day with anxiety or feeling anxious feelings, and they think, well, I'm just this. I just don't like this. And sometimes it's done privately. That's the worst part about it. Sometimes these feelings are done privately. They know about it, but they won't tell anybody about it, Brian. It just won't. Meaning that they don't want anyone else to know about this. Was this ever the case with you?
Yeah, I mean, no doubt. I think about being in high school, being in early college, dealing with mostly anxiety. Depression really didn't hit me until later in college, and then another episode, however many years later. But yeah, mostly anxiety in high school and college. And, when I think there's a few things going on there, right? Not just for myself, but for other people, is like there is the stigma of like,
Right.
society tells us, or at least in the past has definitely told us that it's like not okay to not be okay, right? Did I lose you? Oh,
No, I'm still here, man.
oh, okay. Sorry. Yeah. So, society sometimes tells us that it's not okay to not be okay. There is that piece, which is basically we internalize that information and then we say to ourselves, like, because I'm not okay, I can't tell anybody about it because society is telling me, that I'm not supposed to feel that way. I think the other part too, though, is a little bit of fear of intimacy, right? It's like a lot of us are afraid to open up about anything, or certain things. And so at least from my experience, I know that like as a 19-year-old, it was like I didn't want to talk about feelings. I didn't want to talk about anything, with other people, with therapists, with family members, with friends, whatever. It was like as a dude, especially, we mostly wanted to, hang out, drink, play video games, play basketball, whatever it was. So I think
absolutely, man,
those two forces are really kind of ride in tandem. And so it's like, yes, there is this prevailing societal notion of like, hey, we're not supposed to feel this way. But also a lot of that, like we can take ownership of the part that like maybe we're not comfortable feeling that way and we're not comfortable opening up to other people, regardless of what society says. So a lot of the work that I do as well, with my brand is like helping folks figure out how to be a little bit more emotionally vulnerable, right? And letting them know that it's okay
absolutely
to be that way in the right situations. In fact, it's like the more you hold those emotions in, I think you eventually get to a point where you realize that like they're just going to eat away at you. So it's like eventually you reach this tipping point of like saying, I actually need to do something about this because regardless of what I'm telling myself and society is telling me, this is no way to live, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely, man. We as humans, and I say we, us, everybody, people, we are quick to mask our greatest pain and we'll hide it behind different things. And society will tell us, hey, look, you need to keep something inside. Society sometimes will tell us we need to keep some things private. You need to keep your mental illness to yourself private. Keep it private. And because we listen to society sometimes and we do keep it private, we struggle with it privately. But here's the worst part about it, though, Brian. We struggle with it privately, but we openly, publicly, it's being seen. We look at a lot of things that happen in the news, and then it comes out, oh, they dealt with depression. They did this happen, this terrible thing happened, but it was because they battled depression.
Yep.
They did this terrible, awful event to this school or to this church or to this whatever, is because they thought so negative about themselves. We fight it privately, but really it's a public battle, man.
Yeah. And it is, there's no doubt, like I'm not trying to trivialize the notion of coming out, so to speak, and being like, I deal with these things, right? It is difficult. Nobody wants to raise their hand and be like, I'm struggling, I'm dealing with anxiety, I'm dealing with depression. Like, let's just flat out say that, right? Nobody wants to deal with that.
Absolutely.
At the same time, right? If you think about some of these sort of platitudes or just like I don't know, cliches that people will throw around, there's actually a lot of those apply pretty well, right? So one of them that I'm thinking about is like, you're only as sick as your secrets, right? It's like, okay, if you are depressed and you are not telling anyone about it, like, dude, that's a secret and it is killing you. It is making you sick, right?
Literally.
Yeah. The other one that I think about, right, is like, some different, it's not, it's a very simple thing, but like people will say, tell the truth, right? I think Jordan Peterson sometimes says like, that's one of his mantras or whatever, is like, tell the truth. And I think a lot of people look at that and say like, oh, I'm telling the truth because I said my name was Brian, or I didn't say that my name was Frank or something like that, right? But if you really get nuanced about like telling the truth, it's like, are you displaying who you are to the world? Accurately? Are you being honest about what you're going through internally? And don't get me wrong, like, there's times where it's like you wake up, you're having a bad morning. You don't always necessarily need to run to Instagram and be like, I'm having a bad morning and I'm telling the truth about it, right? But in general, from a broad context, it's like, if I am, I'll just use myself, right? If I am depressed and I'm going on Instagram all the time saying like, look at how amazing my life is, I'm having all this fun, yada, yada, yada. It's like, that is dishonest, right? And that is actually fueling, probably subconsciously, the depression even more, because now there's a disparity between what we look like on the inside and what we are presenting to the world. And we're saying, oh, dude, like those two things don't match up. And so this rift is actually creating more pain inside of me. And so tell the truth, right? It's like, be honest about who you are, what generally what you are doing in your life and what you are going through, which feeds back into that you are only as sick as your secrets, right? It's like, if you are holding things in, you're not being honest, and it's probably creating a lot of pain for you. So I know those are high level and vague cliches, but like, I think when you think about it, they make a lot of sense, right? And it's like, again, not every day do you necessarily need to be like, I feel like a 10 and I feel like an 8 and I feel like a 4. But in general, right? It's like, you think, I guess another example, right? It's like when people have jobs that they don't enjoy and they show up every single day and they're like, this job sucks, but I can't tell anybody about it. And I'm throwing my life away, that sort of thing. It's like, that is also, don't get me wrong, there are challenges there, right? It's like everybody has to pay the bills and put food on the table. I totally get it. But at the same time, it's like holding the two things at the same time and saying, okay, I do need to pay the bills and I need to feed my family and all that, but I don't like what I'm doing here and I'm not being honest with myself about how I'm living in my life. Is there a way for me to sort of bridge the gap between those two things, become a little bit more honest, so to speak, and then from there, like, maybe that will help me emotionally?
Absolutely, man. Absolutely. Could not have said that better. And it reminds me of this, Brian. Man, life is kind of like one of those. You ever see one of those scales of justice where she's holding, and life is kind of like this. One day everything's like this for you, and it's a 10 or 8, and then some days it's like this, and you are 4 or 3, and then sometimes you're trying to find out what can you put over here to balance ourselves out, because sometimes we aren't the best. We don't feel the best. And it's not that we're terrible or bad or good. Life is a juggling. It's a balancing act. Where am I today? Yesterday I was definitely at an 8. Now I'm more about a 6 today. Again, yeah. And because we have social media, because everything is so instant, right there in front of us, access immediate, it does add that own stress pressure when we're on social media a lot and we see it. Everybody seems to be in great, they're in good mood, and we ask ourselves, what switches do I need to flip to look like that? What switches do I need to flip to be like that? What switches do I need to flip? Because every time I see their picture, they're happy. Every time I see them, they're enjoying themselves. They got to be the happiest person on this earth. And here I am, miserable. And you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And when I first discovered social media, man, I took everything as face value. Like, oh, geez, everybody's happy. Like, wow, good grief. And I realized, oh, these are just screenshots. These are just the movie trailers. That's all these are. This isn't the real movie. And then they hit me. Oh, crap, please. This is nothing. And we that stress of things that we see, whether it's social media or in our families, the stress of what we hear, and it causes that anxiety on us. And we try to figure out, what is that one thing, that one switch that we can hit, man, that can turn things around for us? That one switch. And again, I'm going to keep saying this throughout the episode, through the show, guys. There is no one switch. If we believe that there is one switch that will turn everything around, we'll go through life frustrated. We'll go through life searching for one switch, and there's a series of switches. Well, how do you know this? I remember I lived in an apartment, Brian, a while back, and I lived in this apartment. Actually, it was a house, and you could come through one door, and it had a light switch that could control the lights, and it had two entrances. And if you go through the other entrance, it also had a switch that could control the light. So there were multiple switches depending on which door you came through that could give you control of the lights. Depending on our experiences, guys, we will have multiple switches. No one experiences the same thing. And because we all have different experiences, we all have different switches, Brian.
You just made me think of something interesting, right? Where you got this room, you got two light switches, they both control the same light. Not only are there multiple switches, but on different days, those switches do different things, right? So it's like on day one, I'm like, oh, I thought that switch turned the light off. Now it looks like it turns it on. I go to the other side of the room. Oh, I thought that light did the opposite, right? So it's really having that contextual awareness to be able to say, like, I'm in this specific kind of situation, or this is what is going on around me. So I might need a different strategy. I might need to look at this strategy in a different fashion, because, as we're alluding to here, it's like, depending on that context, the results of the strategy may change. The switch may do different things.
Absolutely. And you know what, man? I thought about it. I'm going to elaborate a little bit more on that. It depends on how we left the last switch.
I like that. Yeah,
so
definitely.
Depending on how we left the last situation, depending on how we approached or had our last perception of that thing, that depends on what you have to do for the next switch. Our perception plays a huge part when it comes to anxiety and stress and depression. So depending on the last impression that something made on us, depending on the last impression the last person left on us, the last employer. If we have an employer that was really cruel and mean and it's horrible, the next employer we get, we're going to be a little anxious and a little timid because that last impression, the last person left on us, and it's going to depend on how we handle that switch, baby. It depends on how that last perception of that last thing that person left, whether it was the last boyfriend, the last husband, the last wife, whatever it was, that last impression is going to determine how we approach that switch. Are we going to turn it on or off or what? And we'll be like, well, I don't know. The last time I turned that on, the lights didn't come on. I hit it. I thought it was supposed to come on, but it turned it off, Brian. Yeah. Last week, according to what you were saying, last week, it turned it on. Now it's turning it off because of that last impression, man. It left some stress on me. It left some anxiety on me because I don't know how the last person left that last switch, or worse, you living with somebody else and they turned the switch on and it turned the lights off, and you come in and you think it's going to turn it off, and here it is. So depending on how the last person left us.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many things that I could dive into there, right? I think one of the things that reminds me of is just the notion that our experiences make us who we are, right? And if you take that, if you apply that in the most extreme version to mental health, it's like the traumas that we go through literally like live in our there's a book called The Body Keeps the Score, right? And it's like the mind and the nervous system hold on to those events. And it's like, we'll go to future events that remind us of those things, and we'll act in the same fashion, or like whether, whatever we took away from that first event, that will then sort of guide us, maybe in a positive fashion, maybe in a negative fashion. And a lot of, like, if you go to therapy, if you work with a therapist or a psychiatrist, right?
Yep.
A lot of that work involves digging into that past and saying, absolutely, how did those events shape you? What map was created as a result of that? And one of the tricky things, we're talking about switches, right, is it's not just what are the switches, what do they do, whatever. If you have such a negative experience, a traumatic experience, guess what might happen? You might not even remember that those switches are there. That experience blinds you to, how you then see the world, what else is in front of you, what could help you, get out of your current situation.
Absolutely, man. You said it right on, man. Head on. So we talked about some things, Brian, you initially when you were dealing with some anxiety in college and different things like that. And we talked about how sometimes people, we deal with things silently, in person, in private, and we say, just mine. I don't want anybody to know about this. So, and we talked about that. Was a lot of times, did you keep a lot of it to yourself because of because of the stigma that kind of goes along with it in society. I don't want anybody to know what I'm dealing with because how it's gonna make me look.
I think, kind of going back to that answer previously, I was more of just not being comfortable with being, vulnerable, being emotionally intimate with anybody, something like that. It scared me to be like, I mean, first of all, there's the question of what am I dealing with? If you're 18 years old, maybe today because of social media and the way that kids interact and the fact that mental health is getting more of the conversation that it deserves, maybe somebody who's 18 today would understand what all those things are. When I was 18, that was so I was going to say 30. That was 14 years ago, something like that. The conversation around mental health was not large enough yet. So I just didn't know what it was that I was dealing with. I was like, I know that I deal with what I would call nervousness, but I don't know what a panic attack is, what anxiety is, all of those things. So a lot of half of it was not knowing the battle that I was in. The other half was like, I don't want to tell anybody about this stuff. Number one, because I don't know what it is. Number two, because, I don't want to be emotionally vulnerable. And then the third part, I think, is kind of feeds into both parts, the uncertainty of like, what if, all the what if questions of like, what if what I'm dealing with is actually really bad? What if it's, this terrible condition that plagues me for the rest of my life? Or people are just like, oh man, you have that, like you're in big trouble.
Oh man, yeah.
So it's sort of like, it was me trying to suppress and push it away. And I think, that is a defense mechanism or a coping mechanism, right? Where you're just like, I'm not going to deal with this right now. And don't get me wrong, like that can work in certain situations, for the smaller stuff, right? But for the big stuff, not so much, right? So it eventually kind of hit a tipping point, I would say. It's really interesting. Like I'm going to make a generalization here. And forgive me if it's wrong, but I think that women are pretty good at detecting emotions. I think men are not as good at it. There was a day at some point, in college where my mom, like I was home for the summer and I was dealing with this thing in my head, right? And my mom was just like, dude, you don't seem like yourself. You seem irritable, yada, yada. Like what's going on? And that was actually really helpful for me too, because it was like the first time that I had a bridge to be like, okay, I have an opportunity to talk about this. Whereas, going out on your own and sort of opening up that conversation can be really difficult. So my mom was, she still is a very important person to me, a true confidant and all that, like a very loving, supportive person. I think to myself, like, hey, if she didn't sort of extend that hand, I don't necessarily know where I would be today. I mean, I think I eventually would have gotten to the point where it's like, okay, I'm feeling bad enough that I need to go do something. But sometimes we get lucky, right? Sometimes somebody crosses our path and says like, hey, how are you doing? Or have you tried this thing? And I don't know, that's grace, like in action right there.
Absolutely, my man. You touched on something. Having people in your corner, a support team or someone to support you is very, very important, because when we're in situations like that, and let's just be honest, guys, and I'll be the first to raise my hand, sometimes we can't trust our own thoughts. Sometimes we just can't trust our own thoughts when we're in situations like that. It's tough. We would like to think that we could trust everything that we think in our heads and our minds. But honestly, we just can't trust every thought that comes in our head. And I know I can't. I know you can't. So we can't. Guys, so Brian, when did you kind of begin to realize and accept that you needed to reach out to kind of get resources to help you out? Now, I know you're a big component on having the right information in hand. And a lot of times you dealt with a lot of things, you suffered a lot of things, or went in different directions because at first you didn't have the right information. You didn't have the right information. You didn't have the right what to's and how to's to do. So when did you begin to realize it's simply the fact that you need to reach out to get better resources to help you, man?
Yeah, I don't have like a clean answer on this one. I think sometimes all of this stuff can be sort of a progression, right? One day you pick something up over here, or there's some sort of event that pushes you in a certain direction. I would say, like, from a high level, I think sort of the significant events were when I got to college, it really hit me. Like I talk about it at the beginning of my first book. I had met this girl that I liked. It seemed like we both kind of were interested in each other. And there was one Friday night, Friday or Saturday, forgive me, but it was a weekend night. I was with some of my friends. Like, I don't know what we were doing, playing video games or something. We weren't drinking. And I got a text message from this girl, and she was very animated and was like, hey, I want to come over and whatnot. And I was like, I think she's been drinking. It wasn't, I was 18 years old, right? It's like, I was absolutely not in the mindset of like, oh, like, and I never would be, but it's like, I know that when people, I just want to preface and say, when people tell these stories, there's always a little bit of sketchiness of like, oh, like that's, one person was intoxicated, one wasn't. That's like taking advantage of it. That was not even on the radar. It was like, I might go grab a couple beers to get on this person's level and, have a good time.
Right.
For me though, I was so nervous. I was like, I had a panic attack in front of a girl that I liked.
Wow.
Probably 6 months prior. And that really, again, going back to the trauma aspect, I don't know if I'd necessarily say that experience was traumatic, but it was definitely a significant emotional event for me. And those events stick with us, right?
Yep.
So here I am in college. This girl that I like is like, hey, I'm coming over, yada, yada. And I can tell based on her text messages that she's been drinking. So I'm like, I don't know if she's going to be aggressive, forceful, whatever. Like, all I know is that I am really nervous because the last time or one of the last times that I had an experience like this, like I freaked out in front of this girl that I liked and things went really poorly, So anyway, like she comes over and long and short, I have a panic attack in front of her and she flips out. And it was very embarrassing, right? That's all I can say. Like, that's the only way that I can put it. I was freaking humiliated. I was 18 years old. Like, here we go. Like, this girl that I like, whatever. And she is throwing F-bombs at me in the hallway, being like, you're a freak, whatever. And I'm not trying to speak poorly of this person, right? It's like, she's a good person. I know her. That's not the intention here. It's more just describing my experience and being like,
exactly.
I woke up that next day and I mean, I don't even know if I slept that night, right? It was like, as an 18-year-old guy, all you care about is going to the gym, drinking, playing sports, women. That might be it.
That's it.
So it was like one of those core pillars of my life shattered. And and again, like, that's when you're 18, right? And then you get older and you realize that there are very, very many important things in your life. And that's just one of those things. But at the time I was pretty mortified, humiliated, all of those words. So I woke up that next day and I was just like, that was one of those events where it was like, I hit the wall and I'm like, I need to do something about this.
Absolutely.
And so that was one of those that I would say, it figuratively started the journey. It also literally started it in the sense that like, that story is the first story in all of my books. Right. And so it's like, that really set me on the path to being like, I need to do something about this. Now, what I will say is that sort of, I need to do something about this was more an internal sense. It wasn't at that point that I was like, I'm going to a therapist tomorrow. I'm talking about this. It wasn't until a little while later that, my mom approached me and was like, hey, you don't seem like yourself. What's going on? She really helped me sort of bridge that gap and have conversations, open up and whatnot. And then there was another event in my senior year of college where I went into this depressive episode and I was on spring break with my friends and I just had the worst week. Like, I was just in such a dark place. I came home and, again, like my mom has been so supportive throughout all of this. And she picks me up at the airport and she's like, how was it? And I was just like, it was so horrible. Like, Mom, let's go get help. Like, and I think I was probably already with a therapist at that point, but I was just like, I need to go to the therapist right now, And I think all of us have events like that where we get pushed far enough where if we were unwilling to talk about things before, it's like, survival is pretty much at stake, right? It's like, if I don't go and talk about this, if I don't find help, like, I'm not saying that I was suicidal or anything like that, but like, there are, events push us and people to those places. And so eventually you get to those points where you're like, I have to do something. Back is against the wall.
That brings up another point, Brian. Sometimes they say when push comes to shove, or when the rubber meets the road, a lot of things we say we would not do. If the situation comes down to it, we have to find ourselves in that position to do so. Now, whether it's a push come to shove moment in our lives, and listen, guys, let me tell you this. Everybody on this planet has survived, that's living right now, that's listening, has survived the pandemic or gone through the pandemic. If you didn't know that you were already in a push to come to shove moment, you missed it. I mean, you have banks that are closing. It's hard sometimes to find good employment. You survived a pandemic, people. We all had to be isolated in our homes for months. If this is not a push come to shove moment, I've never seen one. I will never know one. You will never encounter one where things are stressed on us because of racial disparities or maybe because economical problems. Man, we are already in a push come to shove moment, whether we want to accept it or not, whether we want to realize it or not. Do we all may need counseling or see a counselor? I can't make that adjustment. I can't make that requirement or something for anybody. However, if you know you're feeling overwhelmed and you know you're dealing with thoughts that you can't handle and you've already tried to handle it yourself, listen, you are already in a push come to shove moment and already start, this, when the lights are out in the room and you start in the dark, you start reaching for the switch to turn. We don't even realize that we're already in the dark looking and trying to feel for that switch to turn on to give us some light. Because the last time you came into this room with the light out, you hit your toe on something and you start saying everything. Talk about dropping F-bombs. We were saying everything, bro, because we're already in the dark feeling for the switch to turn on. So there wasn't a specific time, a specific moment, but there were moments that you began to realize that, okay, something's not quite the way it should be. I don't quite feel as natural. And I don't want to say normal because there's no, to me, anybody's normal is different. As natural as it should be in my life. So what are some unique challenges that you've already mentioned to come up, like when you were on a date in relationships? So those are some of the unique challenges you face while trying to manage your depression and anxiety. It can help with so your relationships with other individuals start to have challenges and problems. Am I kind of correct?
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to jump into either of those subjects. I think maybe to pivot a little bit, right? So we've talked a little bit about anxiety. Why don't we jump into depression?
Let's do it.
I tell these stories in hopes that like it'll spark something in someone else that will sort of be like, oh, I deal with that, right? And then maybe we figure out a way to move past it, or we talk about that sort of thing, and then whoever it is that is listening in might be able to that might resonate with them, and then maybe they take that into their own life, right? So in terms of depression, like you said, difficult moments and whatnot, right? I think anxiety, if I'm looking at things from a higher level, anxiety can sometimes be more of those pinpoint acute moments on the calendar, right? It's we have a first date, we have a job interview, we have an important conversation that we need to have with someone. We don't know how we're going to pay our bills, something like that. Like we have moments on the calendar, or at the very least, like moments in time that eventually those things will pass. And then it's like, okay, maybe a different anxiety provoking event comes up, but it's more acute. I think depression is what makes depression so difficult is that it's almost like this nebulous blob, right? It's this cloud that hangs over us all the time. It can be really difficult to get that cloud to move, so to speak. When I talk about, like, I guess what I want to talk about a little bit is my second book. So in that book, it's called Get Out of Your Head, Volume 2, Navigating the Abyss of Depression. That was, the same sort of book as my first one, where it was basically me telling personal stories,
Right.
incorporating research about, the disease of the subject of the book, right? So for that second book, it's like me telling my own story of a battle that I had with depression, what led me there, what helped me get out of it, and then also bringing in a lot of the science to be like, research tells us this. This is how I applied that to my journey, or this is how you could apply that to your own battle, right? So that specific battle with anxiety, depression, that was a difficult one. I mean, I'm not, I never want to come on these shows and be like, poor me, this is the suffering Olympics.
Right.
I know I don't. I know that there's endless suffering in the world, right? But I'm just here to tell my stories in hopes that they inspire some people. So in 2018, which is the setting around which that second book was written, I just had a bunch of like sort of a confluence of different events arise in my life that sort of pushed me into this state of despair. So the first one basically was like I had gotten this new job that I had kept telling myself. I was like, people say there's a term like called an "I'll be happy when" statement, and I think a lot of us say to ourselves, "I will be happy when I have $1 million. I will be happy when I learn to play the guitar. I'll be happy when I'm finally able to travel to Spain," something like that. One of
Right.
the difficulties with a statement like that is that it's pushing our happiness off into the future. And
Mm.
a lot of people say like there's no such thing as the future. There's only kind of right now, right? There's only the present moment. And I know that's a little new age or whatever, but if you think about it, right? If you're like, I'll be happy when that happens, like what happens if that never
Never.
occurs, right? It's like,
Absolutely.
are we setting some precedent for ourselves that says like, okay, if I never learn to play the guitar, I'll never be happy? I mean, probably not, but like a lot of us still hold on to these phrases, right? So I had one of these phrases that basically said, I was in a job that I didn't enjoy. If I could just get this other job, it's like basically remote software development. I'll have more freedom over my schedule. I'll be able to take more time to write books and blog posts and travel and all that stuff. I was like, if I could just get that job, I will be happy. And not only was I not happy, but I actually like the work that I was doing was just so unfulfilling. And it's not to, again, none of these conversations are to speak poorly of people. It's just to describe the stories.
Correct.
So I was on this project, like basically it was for a large corporation, and they just weren't in a position for us to do anything. So they were like, keep waiting, like we'll have work for you to do. And it was like, show up to the office, maybe work at home, whatever, sit there, twiddle your thumbs. If I went through that again today, I think I would have been smarter and said, all right, we're just going to write a bunch of blog posts and not tell anybody about it, right? That's what we're going to do. But I was not smart at the time. And I'm not saying I'm smart now, but maybe a tiny bit smarter than I was previously. And so at the time, I just basically sat there and was like, okay, I'm gonna sit here. I'm gonna twiddle my thumbs. I'm gonna read like software development articles. I was miserable. It was not fun. It was not fulfilling. I was not present. I just wasn't engaged in what I was doing. So there was this. I talked earlier about discrepancy, disparity, rifts, all that sort of thing. So in my mind, there's a big gap between expectations and reality. I was like, I was supposed to be happy with this job. I'm not. At the same time, I would call it something of a quarter life crisis. I took my nephew to a fair where my parents live, in the town where my parents live. And it was one of those whirlwind moments where like I'm taking him on all the rides that my parents used to take me on. And I'm like, it hit me in the face. It was like, holy crap, I am a quarter of the way through my life. My nephew is getting older. It's like, I'm going to be dead soon, right? One of those moments, like I'm not happy and I'm going to be dead soon. And then that same day, actually, I got home. One reason or another, I stumbled into all this. I read this article online and basically sent me down this rabbit hole into researching climate science. And, if you read the wrong science, I don't want to say the wrong science. If you read a scary article, right, it will tell you that the world is going to hell in a handbasket tomorrow, right? We're going to pollute the planet
right now, we're going
right now. And this is not to debate like the science or anything like that. Like I am a firm believer that the things that we are doing to the planet are not good. Now, whether that means not good tomorrow, not good in 2,000 years, I have no idea. I just know that we're doing bad things, right? So I'm in this quarter life crisis. I'm thinking about like, how not only I'm going to be dead soon, but everybody on the planet is going to be dead soon because we are just annihilating the planet. From there, I guess the last piece of the puzzle was my grandmother ended up passing away shortly thereafter. And again, it was, none of I wouldn't say that any of these things, like, thank God, like I did not come into some unforeseen horrific tragedy, right?
I know, right?
My grandmother was 90 years old. She lived an amazing life. I mean, she struggled with cancer and dementia and whatnot, but excuse me, I get a little emotional when I talk about it.
I understand, grandma, man. I'm sorry for your loss there, bro.
Thank you. And so, I didn't go through any horrific tragedy. It was more like, just moving on through life and realizing that things were passing by before my eyes and sort of having this quarter life crisis, right? And so it was a long period of me questioning everything, questioning death, existence, life, all of that stuff. And I went so far into my head, oh man, just like if you go far enough into that climate science stuff, and then also the fate of the planet and the fate of mankind and AI and all that, like, you can drive yourself absolutely crazy. And that's what I did for about a year. Like, I didn't mean to, right? But it was like, you get yourself in this state, you feel like you can't get yourself out of it. And then all of a sudden that's where you're living every day. And so slowly, I don't even want to say slowly, but surely, I'm just going to say slowly. I sort of looked at where I was in my life, and I was like, dude, this is bad. And I need to, I already have this brand focused on mental health, centered around my first book on anxiety, of telling people how I dealt with some of my past experiences, my past struggles. I was like, I don't exactly know what it's going to be, but I do know that, like, I'm going to eventually get through this battle with depression. Right. I'm going to turn around and kind of have the same game plan, right? I'm going to talk to people about how I figured this thing out for myself, in hopes of sharing that story and helping others through the same situation. And again, it's not self-promotion. It's not me being, oh, poor me, anything like that. It's just, how do I take this thing that I deem negative and really poorly, really difficult, really challenging, and use it in a positive fashion, right? Because absolutely, what else are you doing, right? It's like, if you're not doing that, what else are you doing? So it was just another one of those moments. I was like, I have to go on that same exact journey that I've been on, of like, I'm turning this thing into something positive. I'm going to try to help other people. So that is the foundation of the story. I guess, why don't I pause and say, what questions do you have? And like, how do you want to transition into, some of the tactics, some of the philosophies around, like, maybe getting out of depression, something like that?
That part we will tackle, Brian. Before we tackle that, guys, I do want to jump into this real quick. Guys, don't forget, do me a favor. I say this all the time. Guys, do me a favor. There is a link that is now in the chat. There is a link that is in the chat, and I want you to click on that link when you get a chance. Guys, listen, you all know that Walmart is an affiliate sponsor of TMG Tell Me Something Good podcast. I don't want your money. What I do want you to do is I want you to go shopping. Do it what you normally do. Shop, shop, shop. Whether it's the Walmart pickup, or whether you're buying something special for the holidays that's coming up, or for that special person that's in your life. Do me a favor, guys, and click on the link that's in the chat. Or if you are using another device, you can scan the QR code that you see on your screen. Keep in mind, I may earn a commission when you buy through this link. So please click on the link that's in the chat. Shop, shop, shop. Yeah, did I say it again? Shop. Yeah, that's what I want you to do, guys, is to use that link, and it will remain in the chat so you can use it. So that is the good point there, Brian. What are some of the things that you use, the techniques and tools that you use in order to kind of deal with this and work through this? Because people are dealing with depression, like I said, anxiety a lot of times. Mostly it's a silent thing. And you mentioned 1.1Q was to have a strong support team around you. So what are some things that you use to help kind of come out of this rabbit hole that you find yourself in, and to flip that switch, so to speak?
Yeah. So obviously we were talking about depression. Do you want me to answer this in the context of anxiety, depression, anything mental health? What do you think?
Whatever works for you, man. Because there's usually a fine line between anxiety and depression, because sometimes anxiety leads to it. But answer it in the context of someone who's listening right now who says, man, Brian, I hear what you're saying, and that was me. Not in college, but that's me now. That's me with my kids, my wife, my job. That's me right now.
Yeah, I mean, oh, man, it's like I could talk about this stuff for hours. Let me try to present something. Let's see if it's interesting. So I come from a software development background. I write a lot of software. I build mobile apps, that sort of thing. You spend a lot of time in any avenue doing anything for 40 hours a week, whatever it is. And then you go have a side hustle, nights and weekends sort of gig. Those two things are inevitably going to bleed into one. So there's this concept from the computer science world, basically called state management. So it's like in a software program, that program is responsible for sort of managing all the inputs that come into the system, right? So let's say, you're typing in Microsoft Word, right? There are the keystrokes. There are, some of the buttons that you're pressing at the top of the menu and things like that. All of those inputs are gathered by the system and then managed in a way that it'll say like, oh, I'm currently in editing mode, right? I'm currently in suggestion mode, something like that. Each of those modes, so to speak, becomes a state. And then the way that state management works, or the concept in software development, is that a program functions in a specific fashion based on the state in which it is in, right? Not necessarily rocket science, but still an interesting concept. The other notion, I guess, is that to get from one state to another, you usually need to do specific things, right? So in software development, or when you're building software, it's like, there may be 3 states to get from it's possible that you couldn't get directly from state 1 to state 3. You may need to go 1 to 2, 2 to 3, so on and so forth. If we take that concept and we say, rather than vague like software states, let's talk about emotional states, right? We all get into different emotional states on a daily basis.
There you go.
So a lot of the work that I do, or like this sort of framework that I'm trying to pose here, right, is basically us saying to ourselves, okay, let me figure out which states I get into and out of on a regular basis. Let me sort of create a map. Almost, these are called state machine diagrams in the software development world. So I talk about these in my work as well. We want to create our own state machine diagrams. We want to say, okay, on a regular basis, I'm in a joyous state, I'm in a depressed state, I'm in a hopeful state, I'm in a worried state. Then what we need to do is we need to figure out what are the actions that you can take, or you normally do take, to move to one state from one state to another. And also, how do you act in those specific states, right? And then are there ways that you could potentially come with some awareness and say, oh, I'm doing that thing in that state again, I need to break out of it. So the theory that, or the thing that I want to posit here is basically, we need to figure out, and this goes back to the toolkit, right? It's like, we need to figure out what those states are, but then we also need to figure out the ways by which we move from one of those states to another. So, putting it in plain English, what are some of the things that make you feel better when you are anxious?
There you go.
Right? Maybe it's going for a walk. Maybe it's listening to your favorite song. Maybe it's doing 10 jumping jacks, calling a friend. There are endless possibilities. The whole thing, right, is like, this is really, I'll call it, there's macro and micro, right? It's like, this is micro stuff of figuring out, I'm in this specific situation right now. What is something that I can do to change that emotional state? So developing that toolkit that we talk about is basically coming up with all of those different tactics for yourself, whether it's completely on your own with my help, you read one of my books, something like that, you start putting those ideas in your toolkit. The other, I think I'm going to kind of pause here, but also just give a quick preview, is like, there is also, sometimes we have to focus on the macro stuff, the bigger higher level stuff, right?
Exactly.
So it's like, and I think, I'm not positive, but I think in general, anxiety can be more of that micro, depression can be more of that macro.
Exactly.
We can dive into it a little bit more, like in another part of the conversation. But in the second book that I wrote, I do focus a lot more on those high level buckets, right? So there's a model that sometimes people come up with. It's basically a model for evaluating where diseases come from. It's called the biopsychosocial model. People sometimes apply it to the concept of depression. So biopsychosocial is a portmanteau of 3 different words: biological, psychological, and social. Those are 3 high-level macro buckets, right?
Right.
So biological, we can say, how are we using our bodies? What food are we eating?
Exactly. What's going in?
Exactly. Our brains, our genetics, all that sort of stuff. Psychological is more, what are the thoughts that we are thinking? What beliefs do we hold? How do those things affect us?
Correct.
And then social is sort of the large, vague other bucket. Where do we live? Do we have friends? Do we like our relationships? Do we like our jobs? Those sorts of things. The theory on the macro level when it comes to depression, and I apologize, I said I was going to pause, but I'm just going through. When it comes to depression, if any of those buckets falls out of whack, to a large degree, it's likely or possible that we could experience depression. At the same time, if all 3 of those fall down a little bit, we could also experience depression, right? If we are not necessarily where we want to be in our lives, if our expectations for where we were supposed to be versus where we are right now do not match reality, boom, that's the equation for depression in some sense, right?
Absolutely.
And so I think kind of coming up with that toolkit and being able to have the view of both the micro and the macro can be really important. At the same time, I think that it's important to link these two things together and say that just as we can sometimes get ourselves out of an anxious state by saying, I'm going to go for a walk and kind of get this fear out of me. Even though like depression, it can be really, really overwhelming and difficult, right? It's like if we can add enough of those wins together, eventually we can help move that dark cloud that's hovering over us. And so it's really important. Like the reason I stress the state stuff so much is it's foundational, right? It's the elemental thing. And if it's like if we can manage our emotional state on a regular basis, it's much more likely that whether it's a micro or a macro issue that we're dealing with, we're eventually going to get through it.
Guys, that is the switch that we're talking about right there. Sometimes, guys, listen, we won't be able to eliminate everything, every bad moment from happening. In other words, we can't stop it from raining. Sometimes it will just rain. Sometimes it will be just too hot for us to go outside. Sometimes it will be cloudy. And sometimes it'll be windy. We won't always find or have perfect conditions in our life. But Brian said something, we have to be able to manage the switch. Guys, do me a favor. I want you, everybody, to thank Brian for being here. He showed us and told us about what his book, guys. Brian's book. What's the name of your book, Brian?
Both of the books are called Get Out of Your Head. First one is Get Out of Your Head, a toolkit for living with and overcoming anxiety. Second one is Get Out of Your Head, Volume 2, Navigating the Abyss of Depression.
Wow. I'm going to put up a picture of Brian's book, guys, right here. Where can they find this book, Brian?
Yeah, you could go to my website. It's getoutofyourhead.com. That's all one word, no dashes, no spaces. You'll find links to the book there. If you want to go directly to an online retailer, you'll find it on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Apple, Kobo. I think there's one more retailer. I just can't remember. Oh, it's Google Books. So you could find it all there. If you do go looking for it on a specific website, just know there is another book that has done really well with the same name. It gets confusing. A lot of people are like, hey, which one is yours? Where is it? That sort of thing. It might be more helpful to type in my name, but if you know what the book cover looks like, that could also help.
There you go. I placed Brian's social media information, guys, and his website information in the link. It is there. His LinkedIn is all the information you need for Brian. Look, that book title, as well as the book cover, you can't miss the book cover. Trust me, you cannot miss that book cover. Guys, listen, I want to thank our very special guest, Brian Sachetta, for being here. And Brian, I didn't even ask you if that's the proper way to pronounce your last name.
Sachetta. I think you got it.
Well, close, man. I'm trying to get it there. Sachetta, right? Sachetta?
Yeah.
See, there we go. Guys, Brian, thank you so much for being part of the show today, guys. You have added value to everyone that's listening. I know you have it. Can y'all let me stop? Look, everybody, here we go. Stop now. Thank you, Miss Laura Hunter. Wonderful podcast. We appreciate that. They will not let me go home, even though I'm already at home. Can I finish the show? Please. Goodness.
Hey, we delivered good information,
I know. Let me go home. I got to eat. But thank you, Laura. Laura always tunes in. She always watches. She enjoys the show a lot. So we got to give a huge shout out to Laura Hunter for joining in each week, man. We appreciate that and all your love that you bring to the show. Guys, what we're saying and everything that we shared tonight, guys, even the best of us need help from time to time, okay? A switch gives us that control back that we may need. Finding that switch of control is important because it will allow us to function and what we can be in otherwise pressure-filled situations. It does not mean we'll have some magic or even we won't feel the pressure of life. That's not what it means. It does ensure knowing that the switch is there. Then when the switch is there, that we can have our handy switch that's there whenever we need the need will arise. So doesn't mean you won't feel the pressure when you walk in the room, but just knowing that that switch works on the wall makes a heck of a lot of difference for us, guys. You know how we do it. Guys, don't forget, tune in next week, 6:30 p.m. Central Standard Time, 7:30 p.m. Eastern. We're going to have another special guest, Brian, before we get out of here, man, is there anything you want to say before we break out tonight?
Yeah, I just want to say to folks listening in, like, remember, you are not alone in these battles. I'm right there with you. My heart goes out to you. Like, keep fighting. Things will get better. I am not. That is not to trivialize what you're going through, but just to give you some hope.
Absolutely. Somebody said they can't wait to read the book already. My gosh, so we got here, they're already getting your book, Brian. So that's awesome, man. That's the whole point about it, is by getting good information into the hands of all of our listeners. Guys, you know how we do it. Yeah, you know how we do it. Central Standard Time, 7 p.m. Eastern, for the brand new episode of TMG. That's Tell Me Something Good Podcast. And guys, you can stream your favorite episodes on your favorite podcast platform, like Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and so many more. Guys, before we get out of here, you know how we do it in a party. If you're going to tell me something, then tell me something good. I gotta go. I'm out of here. Peace.